We can't spend another holiday feeling bad for Eric. There's nothing that could have changed the path he was on.
In 2021, South Park changed the game with 2 specials titled Post-COVID, set in a future where the boys stopped being friends and never found their way back to each other. A future where Stan and Kyle are both alone and kinda miserable, with Stan being a professional drunk.
I'm an online whiskey consultant. I'm doing research.
And Kyle an online therapist. Kenny was a brilliant scientist with a Nobel Prize, but of course he dies, and his death is actually a catalyst for the events of this special. And it turned out Kenny's most ambitious project was a way to go back in time and save the boys' friendship. So I don't think he was all too happy deep down either. The only person who seemed to be happy in this darkest timeline was Cartman. He became a rabbi, believe it or not, and had a whole family, a wife and 3 kids. But after the events of the second special, Return of COVID, in which Stan and Kyle are able to save the boys' friendship through time travel, the fixed timeline saw everyone get a happy, healthier ending. Except Cartman, who wound up a homeless drunk in really bad shape. When I first watched this, I just thought, yeah, that's about right. But to my surprise, there were a lot of people who felt really bad for Cartman, especially because everyone else reached the good ending. Which might say a lot about me as a person. Psychoanalyze me in the comments down below. But yeah, after seeing him happy with a family, I get why this could feel like a bitter note to end on. And the fixed timeline wouldn't even have existed without him. So now that season 26 is over, with its premiere Cupid Yee delving a bit into Cartman's mental well-being, I thought it'd be a good time to take a good look at how Cartman's behavior determines the trajectory of his life and answer the question, does Cartman really deserve his future? Yeah, probably, but like, it's a little more complicated. So I actually do think there's valid reasons for the answer to this question being yes and no. And I think both reasons are fairly obvious. On one hand, Cartman is, Cartman. He is basically the antagonist of South Park and is a character we're rarely supposed to root for. He's committed more crimes than the US president, the most infamous being the orchestrated murder of his half-brother's parents, in which he proceeded to cook them into chili and feed them to his brother. He's made his mother's life a living hell, to the point where they had to live in a rundown hot dog for a season, and generally just has a tendency to drag down the people around him, while also sabotaging himself. If you broke down every horrible thing Cartman has ever done, him ending up as a homeless drunk being something that's deserved wouldn't even be a debate. On the other hand, he is a child, which doesn't excuse any of the fucked up things he's done. But let's not act like this isn't South Park, a show that exaggerates things to the highest degree in the name of comedy. There is no denying that Cartman's character can be framed as a troubled kid with a mom who has a slew of her own problems, and no father figure present in his life whatsoever. No real connections to any other family members. He has no idea how to express his emotions, and while he struggles with self-sabotaging behavior and impulse control on a daily basis, the very existence of alter egos and hallucinations, such as Mitch, Connor, and Cupid Me, show that there are deeper problems at play. Problems that I believe Cartman is able to overcome, given that we saw him with a stable family and career. Granted, looks like some of those unsavory qualities of his are genetic.
Hakim!
But then that begs the question, what changed Cartman so much in this timeline that he was able to outgrow his bad habits and become a respectable human being? Why does Cartman get better? The answer to this question is just as depressing as the future Cartman's currently headed towards. I believe Cartman is only able to get better when he's completely alone, something that South Park has actually shown us years before the post-COVID special. Back in season 20's Skank Hunt, Cartman hit a low point after he was falsely accused of being the infamous troll Skank Hunt 42, with the boys destroying all of his electronics and dissolving their friendships with them. It's honestly a pretty tough watch, knowing he's not actually Skank Hunt 42. In the aftermath, Cartman is shown to be pretty miserable as a lone wolf. As PC Principal puts it, he's wandering through the hallways with no connection to the world. Though in the context of the actual episode, it's because he was forced to quit social media. It actually seemed as if Cartman was ready to turn over a new leaf, But one thing threw a wrench into that development: his relationship with Heidi. After losing his friends, Cartman gained a new companion in her as she made amends for falsely accusing him, the two growing closer to one another, and they begin to date shortly after. At first, it seems as if this relationship is bringing the best out of Cartman, as he swears off his old ways much to the boys' surprise, and he even helps Heidi get Troll Trace up and running as a way to counteract cyberbullying. However, the cracks were beginning to show throughout this season as Cartman struggled with being honest about his past behavior to Heidi and was clearly possessive over her as he accused Butters of trying to steal her away from him in the episode Not Funny. And all poor Butters did was agree that Heidi's funny. Although, Butters clearly isn't in the best place either and contributes to Cartman's paranoia.
The truth is, girls hate us, Eric. They're sick of our shit.
He gonna spittin' though! Season 21 shows a steep decline in Cartman's relationship with Heidi, as he wants her to bend to his every whim just like his mom does. His manipulation and abusive behavior is at its peak, and the end result is sweet little Heidi turning into another Cartman. Truly terrifying stuff. But I think it all goes to show that as long as Cartman has someone who's naive enough to feed into his bullshit and enable his behavior, he just won't grow. It's not that his peers are toxic for him, but for Cartman, any attention is good attention, and without the proper help, he will constantly project his insecurities onto everyone around him and envy his peers for having the things he doesn't have, whether that be a semblance of a stable family, a shiny new PSP, or indulging in child labor. So if being alone is the thing that forces Cartman to grow into a better person, then I think the next question would reasonably be, how? How does loneliness cause Cartman to get better? Since, in the initial future timeline, we never actually see the path Cartman took to end up where he did. And I think it's as simple as loneliness causing Cartman to take a good look at himself and seek help. This is where Season 26's Cupid Yee comes into play, as that episode relates Cupid Cartman, aka Cupid Me, Cartman's imaginary friend, to Kanye West, with Cupid Me changing his name to Cupid Yee, and Cartman pointing out that ever since Cupid Yee changed his name and got all into Jesus, he's been acting a little batshit crazy. The resolution to that episode being Cartman forcing Cupid Yee to start medication, turning him back into regular old Cupid Me. Considering Cupid Me is an extension of Cartman, it's not hard to interpret this as Cartman acknowledging that he himself wouldn't be such a hateful, self-sabotaging person if he got help. Now look, although we're talking about a cartoon, I know people can feel some type of way about medication, and I'm not trying to say that medication is the only way someone can get help. I'm just rolling with what this particular episode provided. That being said, Cartman could have become religious and found a community within that religion, given that again, he's a rabbi in the initial future timeline. I don't think there's a clear answer. It could have been a combination of things for all we know. The point is really that his loneliness leads to introspection, which leads to him making a meaningful change. I do think religion could have done a lot for Cartman in general, considering atonement is something practiced in Judaism. And I can see Cartman having a strong emotional reaction to the process of confessing his hefty list of sins and being forgiven for them, which is a very important distinction between this and other times Cartman's almost had a face turn. Because in a situation like his relationship with Heidi, Cartman actively tried to hide his past in the early stage of the relationship and gradually slipped back into his toxic ways. Whereas with religion, he has to be upfront about how much of a little gremlin he is to make any substantial progress. All of this raises one more question. Is it possible for Cartman to improve himself with the boys, to become a better person without losing his squad? And the answer is maybe. I think the problem is that Stan and Kyle in particular have a hard time giving Cartman the benefit of the doubt. Rightfully so. Hell, that was the bit with Cartman and Kyle in the post-COVID special, with Kyle refusing to entertain the possibility that Cartman actually had a change of heart, convinced that this is all an elaborate plan by Cartman to drive Kyle absolutely crazy. While I don't think the boys are inherently toxic for Cartman, I do think that he's dug a hole for himself that makes it hard for the boys to ever take a redemption arc seriously, which wouldn't be the best vibes for him to be around should he ever commit to making positive changes. I truly think that Cartman would have to go through something major that would cause the boys to sympathize with him and motivate him to improve as a person. I think the closest we've gotten to that would have been the aftermath of Scott revealing that Cartman killed their dad and turned him into chili. But of course, Cartman ruined that moment by focusing on the fact his dad was a ginger. I do think it's worth mentioning that Cartman becoming homeless does imply that his mom either cut him off or straight up died. Although with her being absent in that initial timeline, I do think it's more likely that she sadly could have passed. Either way, both scenarios would have a severe impact on Cartman, and how he responds would be pivotal in where he ends up. Does he improve himself or wallow in his misery and only get worse? We see that both are possible. So, does Cartman really deserve his future? Well, it depends on if he's willing to get himself help or not. If he does nothing to turn his life around and only contributes to making it worse, the answer is obviously yes. But if he takes the proper steps to turn his life around, then no. But I think in that situation, he wouldn't even end up like this. It is worth mentioning that Cartman started hanging out with Clyde, Jimmy, and who the fuck is this? In the initial future timeline, but I'm not sure how long that lasted given that none of them are like, hey, Cartman, what's up when they reunite. In fact, he gravitates to Stan and Kyle. So I don't know if those friendships lasted all too long, or if they can be used to argue that Stan, Kyle, and Kenny are the ones that hold back Cartman. Now I want to reiterate that this is just a fictional paper cutout, whose life is determined by two middle-aged men. And real life isn't as cut and dry. I know that. Look, I just know the comments on these South Park videos can get kind of intense, which is why I don't read them. I just don't want to go off the impression that I think everything I'm saying can apply to the lives of real people one-to-one. It definitely cannot. But as always, these are just my thoughts, and I would love to hear yours. What do you think? Does Cartman deserve his future, or does he deserve a shot at a happier ending without everyone else getting screwed over? Let us know in the comments down below. And keep the conversation going by giving us a follow at AllStrickVox and at Roundtable Vids on Instagram and Twitter. If you enjoyed this video, please sure to like and subscribe to the Roundtable for more great South Park content. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have an awesome day. See ya!